David Lynch, I remember, used to always say, everything is about Marilyn Monroe. Mm-hmm. And to me, everything is about Al Capone.
To me, the contemporary version is everything is about the Kardashians.
Well, what would the Kardashians even know about getting let's say a multiple murderer off a legal trial?
Yeah, I forgot about that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Marilyn Monroe.
That is off topic.
Kimmy K, Al Capone.
It's the new Mount Rushmore, you know?
Exactly.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? How? Good,
Hi,
fine.
how are you?
So here we are.
Oh, was that the start?
I think so.
Wow, so my first words on this podcast are, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
Which I said as a joke.
It wasn't funny.
Well, I'm Dan O'Sullivan. I'm a journalist, and now I'm a podcast host, too.
Wow. That's an unlikely jump.
It doesn't happen.
No one's ever done that.
No.
What type of stuff do you like to write about?
Lately, I feel like it's been drifting towards the mob, which is... Drifting, yeah. I mean, after I couldn't get a living doing anything else. You know what I mean?
Got it.
Just move towards illegality, crime,
yes.
Vice,
Maybe learn a couple things. Well, maybe you've been drifting, but you have been obsessed with the mob forever.
That is true. I have been. Growing up on Long Island, when The Sopranos hit, everyone on Long Island thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Everyone everywhere.
But especially there, because they didn't get that it was not a positive thing
right.
to be those people.
It was just kind of making fun of them.
Right. And then they started voting for Trump, and, it's just been one success after another for Long Island. But the point being, I've always been obsessed with the mob, and we'll talk a little bit about that on our podcast. But what are you doing here, though? I mean, obviously, I'm a freak. I'm into this stuff.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, right.
Well, we're friends. First and foremost, before this podcast.
Newsflash, we got a scoop.
We're friends.
Confirmed.
Also a journalist.
Mm-hmm.
I would say write about culture.
Mm-hmm.
Vague on purpose.
Right.
But similarly...
Infinitely pitchable.
Infinitely.
Mm-hmm.
I love The Sopranos.
Yeah.
My dog is named after Carmela Soprano.
Right. My cat is named for Tokyo Joe, the subject of my award-winning Chicago Magazine feature.
Oh, wow. I love how you worked that in right at the top.
What in?
I was wondering when you were going to mention that. But yeah, I mean, I think we also both have personal connections.
Yeah, well, I mean, I mentioned growing up on Long Island, it's a very strange thing to grow up in a place where it's always lurking in the background. It's not really spoken of, I remember, so to give an example, my father was a telephone splicer. So he'd go up in a bucket truck to splice the phone lines. Now, this sounds like, ancient alien technology now because of cell phones.
Very old-timey.
Right, but one time, he'd tell me all about these neighborhoods on Long Island, these nice parts of it where the cul-de-sacs had sensors that would activate cameras for the houses at the end of it so they could see everyone coming and going. Wow. Certain gentlemen in the waste management industry lived in these houses. The streets were named, Jonathan Avenue, Catherine Avenue, because they named them for their kids. Right. They had the pull to do that.
Kind of like our current surveillance state, but the mob.
Yeah, well, we learned a thing or two from them.
We did.
And
they were the OG surveillance state.
Nothing but positives came out of that, okay?
Nothing.
Well, other than the day that my dad was up in the bucket truck and two Italian-American, let's say entrepreneurs, came to the bucket truck and forced him down, manhandled him to get his ID because they thought he was law enforcement of some type.
Wow.
But then not too long after, he opened up the telephone box at the top of the pole, and instead of finding wasps or rats or some of the things he usually found a different kind of bug.
Whoa.
And he just closed it and did
just going to pretend I did not
Just did the Grandpa Simpson walking away. I remember he told me it had a label on it saying, got a question? Call this number. And he did not have a question. He was like, okay, thank you.
I like how I'm calling for sure. If I see that.
I would call. Personally, I would call.
Me too, but
So that just sort of inculcated an interest in me. And later I moved to Chicago, which is really the heart and soul of this show in a weird way. It's the most corrupt, beautiful American city. And that's why I started.
Corrupt and beautiful.
We'll get into it. But that's like Al Capone. I moved westward from New York to Chicago. And that really fostered my interest in it. You also have connections
I
of
do.
a different sort
And
to
I
New
do
York.
need to point out, you're not Italian.
That
a little
is-
bit of stolen valor.
Okay,
You got in the magazine award, but not that.
let's establish this.
Okay, this is really important.
I am 15/16 Irish. Now hold on.
Okay.
Okay. I am 15/16.
I don't even know what that means. 15.
Do you know what math is?
No.
Okay.
I write about culture.
Right.
I don't know what math is.
15/16 is almost 16/16.
Okay.
All right?
Wow.
Just to give you a hint.
Sure.
15/16 Irish. Very Irish. The last 16th Italian. God bless my great-great-grandmother who was Italian, because that little speck, that little mote of Neapolitan blood let 1,000 flowers bloom of our food being edible. Now you,
Yeah.
different story.
I'm actually lending the podcast the credibility. Okay. Pizza bagel, which means half Jewish, half Italian.
Okay.
Pretty even split too. I'm not going to give you numbers. I don't deal in numbers as we discussed, but about half and half. And it's very vague, similar to my culture writing, just sort of an egg of a vague air.
An egg?
It's early, okay? It's 11
Not that
a.m.
early. Early for a culture writer.
Yeah, seriously.
Mhm.
So vague mob ties on both sides. So the Italian, my mom's, just sort of funny family stories about Uncle Cosmo coming to Sunday dinner and putting all the shades down and, saying they're watching him and always showing up with random stuff that fell off the back of a truck.
Mhm.
And probably more seriously, my dad's side, the Jewish side, which was in Chicago.
Mhm.
My grandfather was famously a Christmas tree salesman, which is, a very popular job for a Jew.
Well, a lot of the Christmas songs were written by Jewish songwriters.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Proud tradition.
Yeah, but, the guy that I'm named after was Alan, was mysteriously found dead floating in a lake with a lot of money and a gun in his swim trunks. So goes the family lore.
He had the gun and the money in his swim trunks.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they stayed in there. Look, you don't ask questions.
I will say, I've always thought it's tough to go to the beach with a bunch of money and a gun, because if you leave it on the sand, someone could take it. Or you could lose it.
Well, he was dead, so
I guess it didn't matter in that sense.
The quiet part there is that clearly he was murdered, although it was just sort of billed as dead man found in lake.
But the hot thing now is you say the quiet part loud.
Exactly. I was trying to come up with that.
See?
Anyways, of
This
course,
podcast
it's like a
rules.
Jewish tradition that you name the next person who's born after the last person who died.
Is it?
Yeah. Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But I believe
it was
is.
recorded, just so you know. Yeah.
I believe it is.
Yeah.
Someone write in and tell me if that's wrong. Well, you don't name people after people who are still living.
Oh.
Whereas on my Italian side, there's 50 Adams.
Right. Yeah. It's like the Goodfellas wedding.
Yeah. I love that they were we'll name our daughter. We'll just put an A on the end of that name. That's not a weird cursed name. The point is, it's in our blood.
Yeah. Well,
a little.
Your blood.
My blood.
Yeah.
I don't know what stolen valor for you, but
I think what we can all relate to is the mafia, to me, and really the whole conceit of what we've been talking about and doing this show, is that organized crime explains things in a more honest way, right? Than a lot of the other stories that we tell ourselves about this country that we live in, And both you and I have what we do have in common is, we're immigrant stories just like everyone else, And this hustling character to it is, I think, a really valuable way of looking at things, I've always been interested in the mob because I feel like it's sort of a microcosm for how this country works. And it has the added benefit of the stakes being life or death, basically constantly, you know?
Yeah.
It just kind of accentuates all the things that we have to deal with in this country to begin with. And, you know, without getting too far into current events and the fact that we're literally ruled by mobsters today, I'll let you guess who I'm talking about here.
No idea.
The fact is that I think we have a lot to learn from this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the introductory episode of The Outfit, which we should probably talk about the title, it is not a fashion podcast.
Although
obviously.
that would be great. It's not a reference to the incredible fashion that mobsters do wear.
Or us.
Or my incredible outfit and Dan's thing. It is a reference to the mob in Chicago. That's the name.
It is. And of course, it's the organization that was bequeathed by the subject of today's first episode of The Outfit,
Woo!
Al Capone. The guy who explains America. Everything is about Al Capone. We'll be talking about it today.
Okay, Dan. So who is Al Capone? I read the Wikipedia article, which is as far as my prep goes for these episodes, which makes me an expert. Yeah, and obviously, I mean, I think everyone's heard the name. Yeah,
it's like my feeling on Al Capone is like he's one of the most known and least known guy, most famous, least known guys. Let's put it that way, right? That he is the A1 mobster. Everyone knows Scarface. If you go to an ice floe in the Antarctic and you see someone there, which would be interesting, they're going to know who Al Capone is if no one else.
Oh,
I'm
really?
guessing that, you know. I haven't done this yet.
I don't know about that.
Okay.
What time period are we operating in? Let's start there.
I mean, that's another interesting thing about him, right? So he is a gangster who moves to Chicago from Brooklyn in the 1920s. His reign is not very long. He dies at like 46, 47, right?
Okay.
And really his reign at the top is 6 or 7 years during Prohibition and the height of Prohibition, the banning of alcohol, right? But he captured the American imagination, the public imagination, in a way that I think still resounds today, right? Like I'm really not joking. If we look at our current president and how he carries himself, there is an influence of Al Capone.
He was the blueprint.
Yes. And the interesting thing about him is because he was such a cultural figure as well, you know, there was an enormous amount of affection for him, even though he was really a self-interested, you know, vicious killer in many ways, you know?
It's kind of like, I mean, that's what made The Sopranos so appealing, is Tony Soprano is this monster, but you're also rooting for him.
Well, that's the weird thing about Al Capone, right? As a man, he is actually quite likable in many respects. By all accounts, he was kind of a pleasant guy. He was not tipped for any great rise or fall, you know? He was a flashy dresser and a good dancer and a good husband. But there was also this other side to him that's kind of hard to capture, put into words, this viciousness that allowed him to rise to the top, right? And so in 1930, there was a British journalist. Now, this is really at the height of Capone's power. Yeah. Claude Coburn, who went to Chicago, and he went to the hotel, no longer existing, that Capone had his offices in, and he was ushered into Capone's inner sanctum.
Well, and I can only imagine what it looked like.
He was surrounded, the journalist Coburn described it as surrounded by bulging Sicilians, which I thought was funny. He's ushered into the inner office, and Capone, he describes as a plump murderer behind the desk in his three-piece suit.
Was he kind of a small guy?
He wasn't that tall. And yeah, he was a plump.
Okay.
We'll put it, you know. And on the left side of his face, he had 2 deep scars, thus the name Scarface, which he always avoided, trying to not be photographed on that side.
And what were those from?
That was from a guy named Frank Galluccio, who carved him up in a low-rent bar in Brooklyn that Capone was a bouncer at because he'd said his sister had a nice ass.
Classic.
Again.
What a line. That Hardy chestnut.
Yeah. I mean, but so Coburn comes in. Now, this is a long way from the the boardwalks of Coney Island, where this guy's been a bouncer and a sleazeball and all this other stuff. And he has these bowls of roses on his desk that he dips his fingers in throughout the interview. This is a thing people would do after they would eat. They would do that to clean their fingers and make them smell nice. But he's doing this throughout the interview.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah. I mean,
it's kind of baller.
It is kind of baller. Let's bring it back. Let's have it in the podcast studio.
Just dip. Yeah. But I'm sure it's like part intimidation. I don't know. I feel like
it is fucking bizarre.
It is
weird. So weird, right? But Coburn's trying to get into it. Like, what makes you tick? Like, what's your deal, guy? And he says how Capone gets a lump in his throat, and he's like, what would I have been doing without this? I'd been selling newspapers barefoot on the street in Brooklyn.
Oh. And you're a journalist.
Yeah. So
the connection.
But then something funny happens, which is Coburn's a big pinko, right? Later, he's going to become like a communist journalist in Spain and all this stuff. So he goes like that, like, oh, like that. And Capone gets defensive. And he goes, listen, don't get the idea I'm one of those goddamn radicals.
Oh.
Don't get the idea I'm knocking the American system. My rackets are run on strictly American lines. And they're going to stay that way. And then he starts complaining about socialists, right? He says, this American system of ours, call it Americanism, call it capitalism, gives to each and every one of us a great opportunity if we only seize it with both hands and make the most of it. And then he dips his fingers in.
I love these guys. There's always that hairpin trigger and they're just waiting to go on some political rant.
Yeah.
You're like, how did that trigger that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Al Capone, I'm sorry to say, was not woke.
Shock.
I mean, but it speaks to the fact that he saw himself as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, as all that. And in a sense, that was not dishonest, right?
Right.
Because I think what we're talking about here is when he talks about his rackets being run on American lines, he's kind of telling the truth, right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of the premise we're talking about here, right? Organized crime seems to explain everything around us, A big businessman, right, starts out as a gangster. He just does,
Yeah.
Fucking Uber, right? Uber breaks every law in the book in every city they go into and then later makes it legal. It's the same playbook,
And it's always some classic American industry, right? Whether it's transportation or in this case, newspapers, which is how he started.
Well, and, the newspaper racket was one, shoe shining was another, if we go back to his childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, like I said, there was nothing that tipped him for this life necessarily. His parents, Gabriele and Teresa, were very honest, hardworking people. They were immigrants from Salerno in southern Italy, which is where most Italian immigrants came from.
Yes, and I'm Sicilian, by the way. Let's just also get that out of the way.
Right. And again, another misconception. Capone was not Sicilian, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Italian-American experience is much more varied than that, but it is mostly southern Italy and these extremely poor, still relatively...
That's where the mob was centered.
Yeah, and it's the poorest areas of Italy,
Well, that's the theme that we see again and again is sort of how people are pushed, not forced, but, they're not getting into it because they're super well off already.
Well, and the poverty levels in the New York that Capone was born into in 1899, Italian immigrants were earning $2 to $4 less than native-born peers, right? The infant mortality rate's much higher, right? The tenements they were living in had no light, no clean air, all these things. What's interesting is Capone was a little bit better off than them. He was born in the Navy Yard area of Brooklyn by the shipyards, but again, another theme we'll talk about again and again. The Irish had gotten there first, so they had all the best jobs in the shipyard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is something that happens over and over again, right? The Wasps come over looking for gold at Jamestown, right? They get all the best stuff first. The Irish come later. They get the second best stuff.
And then
by the time the Italians and Jews come along, what's left but, really...
The stuff no one else wants to do.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm Irish. They got the best stuff. The cops, the firefighters, the political, machines, the the civil service, all that stuff. Yeah. And so by the time Capone is born in 1899, it's a dog-eat-dog world. Now, interestingly, his father was a barber, which is a little bit more middle class. They were a little better off, And it's interesting you mentioned that with the push-pull, right? Like, this was not a law-breaking household. Nothing was fated here for this guy, right?
Yeah, it's not. It's interesting that we're talking about this time period because that's around when, both my grandparents on the Italian side lived in tenements, were orphaned because their parents died in the Spanish flu. And like my grandfather, I think there were like 9 kids.
Yeah.
And like the census, like at age 10, they already had jobs where it was like tool and die. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like that was.
Well, and that's what Capone's parents did for them. They all had to work. But the realization Capone has is very interesting, which is he starts out shining shoes. Shining shoes is a very competitive thing in the Navy Yard area. And then later they moved to Park Slope where they open a doggy daycare. No, they don't. That's Park Slope today. Yeah. No, he's shining shoes and he realizes if he takes the equipment of the other bootblacks and throws it out, he gets a competitive advantage over them. He gets to take their territory. We're talking, he's 7 or 8 when this is happening, And as you know, I work in a public school as my day job. It's always interesting to me to see what role models kids have, right? Because I feel like a young Alphonse had a few role models to go off of. He was a bright kid, but not too bright. You know what I mean? Like, he was kind of in the middle.
That's always what I say I am. All these people that are obsessed with like, I was a gifted kid. I'm like, I wasn't a gifted kid. I was just sort of...
I was all right.
Smart and run of the mill.
Yeah. I was really into baseball.
But we're the people that really get in there.
Is that right?
Are successful. Yeah. Look at this story.
That's true. Look at us. Oh, I thought you meant us rising to the top.
I think you're probably the gifted kid.
That's its own... I mean, we don't have time
to we don't have time to get into this.
Hey, BetterHelp
but what I'm saying is that kid that's like, just kind of mid smart, but isn't afraid to steal stuff.
High average.
Ends up going far.
And so...
It's the grit.
Grit. It's what you want in a quarterback,
Exactly.
But that's what he did, right? So he starts realizing that I can, if everything's a hustle, right? If everything's about might makes right here, then, when I'm 16 and I hit my teacher in the face at school over a stolen sandwich, which has not happened to me yet at school.
Female teacher.
It was a female teacher. Maybe that's the difference. He leaves school, never goes back, But then the flip side is he's always good with numbers. There's a period of time where he's a bookkeeper. An honest bookkeeper,
Well, something I like about, I don't know if I like it, but I think is interesting is like that strategy that a kid would come up with. Like, I'm gonna take my competition stuff and throw it out. They never really outgrow that. I mean, doesn't that end up becoming his strategy forever?
Yes. And I mean, the mystery is some kids do that and they don't become Al Capone, right?
Yeah.
So what happens? And, something that made a big impact on me is I've tried to understand this over the course of my illustrious career. Don't have to laugh at that.
Illustrious career.
Is the idea of a fragment society. All right, a fragment society, it was this guy, Lewis Hertz, came up with this, political scientist. He said, a fragment society is one where one element of a country goes elsewhere, settles it, right? But they only bring one type of culture with it, right? And it sort of infects everything. And his point was America's kind of a fragment society of these hustling English pilgrims, right? Who came here, they were going to they were going to get gold, they were going to have their own thing, they were going to be rich, right?
Land of the free.
And wave after wave that comes in, we're all coming from different places and different traditions, but we come here and that's kind of the name of the game. It's all like
filtered through that.
And so some of us, have qualities of ferocity and selfishness and all these things that lend themselves to the most, violent, hustling version of that. And Al Capone, for better or worse, I think he could have gone a lot of ways in life, but this is the way he went, And as he gets deeper into the criminal world, I mean, it's weird. Like I said, he goes back and forth. He marries May Capone, who's from a slightly higher class. She's Irish as well, And they have a son, Sonny, who he genuinely loves. He really was a family man his whole life.
And wasn't he married to her the whole time?
The rest of his life.
Yeah.
Wasn't faithful.
Well, obviously.
He caught syphilis.
I mean, none of them were faithful. That's
Gumas.
Yeah. I mean, that's not even.
It's the life. It's not him, She was actually kind of an interesting lady herself, but also very camera shy. But this is when we start to get into the fact that, David Lynch, I remember, used to always say, everything is about Marilyn Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, everything is about Al Capone. His life, his appetites are so American, even now,
To me, the contemporary version is everything is about the Kardashians. Like,
it has become that way.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it's very similar in that there's like basically every like major issue in American culture you can find in that family.
Well, what would the Kardashians even know about getting let's say a multiple murderer off a legal trial?
Yeah, I forgot about that connection.
Mm-hmm. Anyway,
Marilyn Monroe.
That is off topic.
Kimmy K, Al Capone.
The greats, the new Mount Rushmore.
Exactly.
And so it would make sense if this guy who's so American in his appetites, good family man, loves good food, loves dressing well, loves dancing, loves these horrible mentors, these horrible male mentors.
Yeah, like who?
John Torio. John Torio is the guy that ushers him into the organized crime world. He's an acolyte of Paul Kelly. These are the pioneers of Italian-American organized crime in America who look a little bit up the ladder, see the Irish and beyond, and say, we can run these gangs like a business, these rackets like a business.
And so how does he even get in with them? I mean, he's going around, he goes from the shoe shining to newspapers, right?
So he gets carved up working as the bouncer. This is from working as a bouncer at these bars and later brothels. He starts to get more seriously involved in crime with them, right? And feuding with the Irish gangs of Brooklyn and so forth. It's a dispute with one of these Irish gangs that brings him to Chicago for the first time to get some of the heat off him. John Torio, his mentor, who has he has an element of class to him, even though he's a very nasty character, right? He says, go to Chicago, get the heat off. And Chicago enters the scene.
Yeah.
And Chicago is beautiful because it is such a purely American city. It's so corrupt and evil. It has nothing of the old world about it.
Every time I hear something about like something that happened in Chicago in politics, I'm like, that is real? That's a real thing.
Chicago was always like a trade point. It was the portage between the Great Lakes and the Mississippi River. So the first guy to get there was illegally selling hooch to Native Americans there. Like, that's what Chicago was based on. Chicago's named for stinky onion grass, which I love, It's
like me, like naming someone after someone who's murdered or naming someone after stinky onion grass.
Let's do it.
It's like you're fading someone to be fucked up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously the city's going to be corrupt to hell, I mean, it stinks.
It stinks. Also, I love this strategy that we see again and again. May we call it the Catholic Church strategy, where, someone fucks up. Let's just move them out. Let's just move them out of the city. Let's just move them somewhere else.
Right. And move west.
West, always to Las Vegas, in this case, Chicago.
So this is the frontier at that time, right? And it's the American city. Talk about hustling. It's nothing but a hustle. The corrupt mayor at the time of Capone's height, William Hale Thompson, would greet people saying, hello, fellow hoodlums, or hello, fellow crooks.
My God.
I mean, it's just so out in the open, right? It's what they call an open city. And, this is something we learn from around the world. If you look around the world at organized crime, right? It's this complex sort of interplay between a corrupt society and government and politics. And, there's an Italian writer, Diego Gambetta, who says, a mafia is something that sells protection. That's the definition of it. You know, in Russia they call it like your mobster who sponsors you, your krisha, your roof.
Whoa.
It's like you protect me from the rain. You know, and so when Capone moves out there, he sees a city that's ripe for the taking. He's tutored by John Torio, this guy who's going to bring him in, and he realizes that they can take this to the next level. You know, there's no one really seizing the reins here, you know, the way that they could be doing it.
Yeah.
And they could control the city, not the other way around, you know.
The more that you look into all of these different mobsters, the more you realize that the underworld actually isn't really under. I mean, the only way they operate is through deals with the upper world, I guess you would say. Chicago's a perfect example of that.
There's no line between the legitimate and the illegitimate,
yes.
Right? Moses Annenberg, right? They give out journalism awards in the Annenberg Foundation's name. Well, he got his start in gambling, in illegal gambling, running the racing wires that are crucial to illegal gambling. In the slugger wars, labor racketeering. This is where that fortune was made. Now the guy gives out awards for good journalism, right? As penance, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
You see this in Hollywood, you know, totally mobbed up. Lots of these big companies were, you know. I mean,
cops.
I mean,
where do we
come on? It's like, you know, I mean, the corruption is like, it is the tail wagging the dog always, right? And we have this idea that politicians run things. I mean, not to sound like a high schooler who's read Howard Zinn, but I mean that is sort of, but it's still vibe. Sort of true, you know. I mean, so this is the case, right? And so this is what Capone realizes and what he brings to bear on the world. And what we're left with now is a world where that kind of corruption is just running completely rampant, right? He does go to prison eventually, obviously. They get him on the income tax evasion charges. The one thing that he didn't think was going to happen to him, he thought he was going to be killed, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be two options. Get killed, go to jail.
And this is another thing. I'm so glad you brought that up. This is another thing I love about organized crime.
Yeah.
There is usually a just dessert that gets meted out.
Totally.
In a way that we don't have with a lot of other things.
Yeah, I do like that. That it does seem, even if it means going into witness protection forever, which seems like its own kind of hell.
Yeah.
There is
Very
some sort of moral law.
Comeuppance.
Yeah.
It's true.
In the end.
It is true. And you know, so Capone lived most of that. If he was in charge for 7 or 8 years, he lived most of that with assassination attempt after assassination attempt being visited upon him from his rivals. So his reign's only 7 to 8 years. How did he then become like the most influential mobster in just such a short amount of time? I view it sort of as like, remember the movie Wall Street with Gordon Gekko? Yeah, of course. Of course. It's your favorite movie. I mean, you know, but it's pretty good. Michael Douglas, The Greed is Good. It just captured that time, right? Yeah, it was like the forces of the time period, the city. You're right. This is the guy who embodies this time, right? And I think that that's what he was, even though it didn't last that long, you know? And he gets carted off to prison and on this very novel income tax evasion charge, which was really kind of revolutionary, you know? And I should add, there were a lot of brave people who stood up to him in this corruption, you know, because I'm giving a slightly sympathetic view of Capone, right? Like he's one of the only people I've ever seen biopics of where I thought they went too harsh on him. Well, although just to play the devil's advocate here, I mean, some of the other mobsters we've talked about have way rougher upbringings and way worse trauma that sort of make them way more sympathetic. Like I still don't quite understand why he didn't like have to do this. He was sort of from a middle-class background. I mean, this is kind of... Other than just being slightly sociopathic, I'm not sure. It's kind of the enigma, right? Right. We don't totally know. Like Dean O'Banion, who's his big rival, he's an obvious psychopath. This is a guy who, his mentor died falling off a horse. So he killed the horse. Sorry, I don't know why I'm laughing. Yeah. He killed him. So he shot the horse to death. They love killing horses, apparently. That guy did. Bye, oh my. Yeah, that too. Spoiler alert. If you haven't seen it by now, you don't get
the privilege
Yeah.
of a spoiler alert.
You're watching a podcast about the mafia. You had to have seen The Sopranos by this point, right?
If you haven't, there's a problem. Stop listening and go watch
No,
it.
don't do that. Do not do that. Keep watching this. It's episode 1. We got to get out the gate here, all right?
Okay.
But, all this to say, so they get him on these novel charges such that by 1936, he's in Alcatraz. First, he goes to Atlanta Federal Prison. Then he goes to Alcatraz, which is reopening any day now. I don't know if you...
Shout out San Francisco.
Yep.
Where I'm from.
Al Capone, Bay Area legend, He goes to Alcatraz. I've seen his cell there.
Wow.
It sucks. His cell,
okay. Growing up in San Francisco, I do have to say, like, from a young age, they take you out to Alcatraz as this fun thing. It's like genuinely traumatizing as a child. It's a very scary place.
You
love it?
I love Alcatraz.
I mean, sure. Did you go as a kid?
No.
Okay, exactly. That's what's weird.
That would be weird.
But the vibes are off, man.
It is one of the most, in all seriousness, it's one of the most amazing, federal historical sites you can go to in the country. Just, you can hear the city from it. It's very
haunting.
Place.
I mean, one of the details about it is that the windows, which would be like kept crack open, based on where the island is at night, the sound of free people partying in the cities in their mansions would drift into the cells. And that haunts me.
So this is the kind of lonely place he found himself in. Now, when he went away for the tax evasion, first off, they thought they'd rig the trial. They thought they'd buy time. People don't realize he had gone to prison before during this reign, but it had been on his terms. And,
what is that? What do you mean by that?
He had willingly gone to prison in Philadelphia on a gun charge to help get the heat off him.
Well, what's a gun charge?
It was like a year.
Yeah, to a mobster, it's like, okay.
So he was, again, preparing to go to prison for a short amount of time or pay a big fine. They gave him 11 years.
And in Alcatraz.
And it was hard time. And so 1936, James Lucas, he's a bank robber from West Texas. He's some redneck.
He's
right?
His match.
Well, that's it, right? Capone is so irrelevant at this point that he's in the Alcatraz barbershop one day and James Lucas stabs him with a pair of scissors. Now, this is a guy who he had...
cracking the knuckles.
They had tried to kill him for years in Chicago. Tommy gun after Tommy gun. They had failed, right? And this guy can get to him with a pair of barber scissors?
Don't mobsters set themselves up in prison where they're paying everyone off? Like, how is someone just allowed to walk up to him and shank him?
Well, this is it. He's discarded at this point.
Wow.
He also, I should add, he contracted syphilis during
his monogamous marriage of 30 years.
I'm just saying he was working at a brothel named the Four Deuces. You do the math. Okay?
And is that the one that makes you go insane, correct?
It can.
Okay.
Now, he could have actually probably treated it if he might not have known he had it. Though I think you know if you have it. But anyway,
let's not test it and
we don't have to get into it. He didn't treat it. The point is, it led to the type of late stage syphilis where it starts to affect the mind.
Right.
So he had the cognition of like a child towards the end of his life. So he was in this decline. He leaves prison. He moves to his resort home.
So he survives the shanking.
He does survive the shanking. But I bring that up to say, this is how weak he was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the outfit, the mob he had left behind had totally moved on.
Oh, they don't care.
Who gives a shit? These guys never care about each other,
Yeah, it's sad.
It is weirdly a little sad, but so he moves to Florida to his resort there. He lives quietly in seclusion until he dies at the age of 47 or so. And but that mob he left behind just gets bigger and bigger, more professional, more corporate, bigger and bigger. And that's the outfit. That's what it's known as.
Wow.
And it's what, is sort of the archetype for so many criminal enterprises to come. And something I remember when I was starting to write more seriously about the mob, and I was living in Chicago at that time, was the Chicago Crime Commission in 2013. The Chicago Crime Commission was one of these organizations during the Capone era that was trying to put an end to this criminality. And in 2013, they still exist. And in 2013, they named a second public enemy number one. The first was obviously Al Capone all those years ago. But what was interesting was this public enemy number one, only the second ever declared, like I said, had never set foot in Chicago.
Whoa.
Probably never been inside the United States. And that's Joaquin Guzman, aka El Chapo.
Wow.
The head of the Sinaloa cartel. Because in this world we live in today, groups like the Outfit, they've not gone away. They've just become, like all of big business, globalized.
Yep. So now all of them are working together.
Who?
All the different outfits in other cities and all over the world.
I mean, this is it, right? Like, this is what we talk about now. Organized crime today, it's big business, right?
Mm-hmm.
On a scale that makes Capone look amateurish at this point.
Right.
You know, the flow of drugs into Italy through the groups like Cosa Nostra and the 'Ndrangheta, I mean, it is on an industrial scale. It's end-to-end, big business. And the money, incidentally, is the other half of the trade. That doesn't go away. That gets into legitimate business. That gets everywhere. But it must be said, this is not the only way that organized crime has become endemic. I look at Wall Street and I think this is just organized crime made whole. This is just organized crime made legal.
Yeah, you see, once you know the strategies, you see them everywhere.
Private equity firms, those are bust outs, like the nightclub in Goodfellas that they run up the credit on and then burn it down.
Yep.
That's all they do. Hedge funds, those are insider trading operations. That's like fixed horse races. That's all that is.
So even though, maybe they forgot about Capone, they're using his playbook.
Absolutely. I mean, Bear Stearns, one of the big Wall Street banks that went under, they used to have this motto for how they recruited new bankers. PSDs, poor, smart, deep desire to be rich.
Oh my God.
I always think of that because I think that is exactly the same type of person the mob used to go after to recruit, Like that's who they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these guys on Wall Street, they remind me down to some disturbingly close similarities to mobsters and how they act, And just to say, our current United States president, literally nurtured, taught by a mob lawyer, Roy Cohn, in-house counsel to several Genovese family and other 5 family bosses, helped keep them out of prison, helped keep the proceeds of their heroin sales. Trump's grandfather, everyone knows about Fred Trump, his father. Trump's grandfather ran a brothel and saloon in the Yukon Territory during the gold rush. This is baked into the DNA here, And when you hear people like Michael Cohen talk about dealing with Trump, we're talking about how a mob boss communicates.
I thought about him this whole podcast because, just the way he operates.
He does something, and Michael Cohen talked about this, that is very, very, very mob boss, which is he can give an order where it doesn't seem like he gave an order, right? Now, you only do that if you're someone so used to trying to avoid any sort of compromising illegality or some obvious evidence that you're breaking the law. That means you've been doing it for decades, right?
Yeah.
Because it becomes second nature to these guys, So that's the world we're living in now. And so we have to turn this around into a bright note somehow. And I'm going to try to do it.
Oh, God.
Okay. Here's the good thing, though. All right?
Okay, what's the good thing?
The bad thing is, part of the reason it feels like the mob went away is a lot of it just became legal. Okay, that's the bad thing, right?
Okay.
Got legal on Wall Street. Gambling's legal now. A ton of things are legal. There's no justice for anything anymore.
No, just horrible.
We're just corrupt nonstop to the floor. All right, here's the other thing.
Okay. This better be good.
It's good. Giovanni Falcone was this Sicilian prosecutor, right? Who played an instrumental, we'll do an episode on him someday, instrumental role in dismantling the Cosa Nostra in Sicily. And he was murdered for it. Okay, that's the bad part. That's still the bad part. I'm realizing
So you can do good, but you'll die.
I'm realizing we're still in the bad part. And also his right-hand man was also killed after him. But
just forget about that. Just go with us.
Also his wife, also his bodyguards. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Getting those out of the way. Giovanni Falcone said, knowing more about the Cosa Nostra than anyone else, Cosa Nostra is a phenomenon of human society, human nature, like any other, which means it has a beginning.
Points were made.
It seems all-powerful, all-consuming now, but it can and will end also. And I find that very inspiring. Even though he had every certainty that he would be killed fighting them, his prediction rang true that they could be defeated just like anything else that seems totally impregnable, totally not going anywhere.
And like you said earlier, I mean, obviously their negative impact is global, but as individuals, they always have some really sad sort of death or last 10 years. I mean,
I would not want to be any of these guys.
It's not great.
Capone was a bully ultimately, right?
Right.
And he got what was coming to him in the end, right? But I think we really have to understand how these guys operate because here's the problem. They are relentless. They will never stop, you know? It's good people that tend to get dispirited and sort of skulk off, you know? These guys never run out of energy for their little vile schemes.
Well, that means there'll just be so many podcasts to do. Endless podcast episodes.
We got plenty of irons in the fire.
Yes, we do.
We have a lot of stories about mobsters you've heard before, like Al Capone, obviously, right? But it's not just that. The corrupt politicians, right? Mob cops, you know, guys owned by the mafia, you know. We have talking about, you know, how the mob preyed on gay bars and queer spaces.
That's a good one.
The good news about having a world run on greed and violence is we basically have an endless supply of episodes, right? And the sneak peek is you're going to get to be a part of all of it. So I can't wait to bring you into this seamy underbelly. More murders. So please tune in. We'll be back for another episode next week.